A sharp clack echoed through the sparse mountain hut. Tanya, a girl barely a teenager, placed a single black stone on the worn-go board. Her master, a man with a beard as white as the mountain mist, sighed and gently tipped over his king piece. I concede, he rasped, a reluctant smile creasing the corners of his eyes. Tanya's face, smudged with a bit of dirt, broke into a triumphant grin. That means the roasted chicken is mine. Her victory was absolute, her strategy as clean and ruthless as a hawk's descent. But as she celebrated, a low, guttural growl rumbled from her midsection, a sound far more demanding than the quiet click of the stones. The triumph in her eyes flickered, replaced by the familiar ache of hunger. The chicken was a prize, but it was still just a promise. The master's smile softened with a familiar pity. He pushed a small, cloth-wrapped bundle across the table. Inside were meager, steamed buns. Tanya, it is time for you to leave this mountain. She paused, a bun halfway to her mouth. There is a person in the city below, he continued, his gaze distant. He has an abundance of food. More than you could ever imagine. The complexities of his words were lost on her. All Tanya heard was abundance of food. Her eyes, the color of dark, polished ghost stones, sparkled with a pure, uncomplicated desire. Leaving the only home she'd ever known felt like a small price to pay for a full stomach. I'll go right now, she declared, swallowing the bun into bites. The master pressed a small silk pouch into her hand. It felt light, containing only a few coins and a single, perfectly smooth ghost stone. Find the place where the dragons play, he said cryptically. He watched her scramble to her feet, a whirlwind of youthful energy, and descend the winding path. The innocent prodigy, armed with an unparalleled mind for a 3,000-year-old game, was walking toward an unknown fate, motivated by nothing more than the promise of a decent meal. The city was an assault, a chaotic symphony of roaring engines, blaring horns, and a million overlapping voices crashed against Tanya's senses. The air, thick with exhaust and cooking oil, was a stark contrast to the clean, thin air of her mountain. Disoriented and clutching her small pouch, she stumbled through the crowds, a stray leaf in a concrete river. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and wonder, scanned the towering glass structures until they landed on a familiar symbol carved above an elegant entrance. A go board. This was the Shadow Go Chess Hall. In its grand display window was a massive, vertically mounted board showcasing an impossible endgame position. A sign beneath it read, "A 20-year dragon. Unsolved. $50 million reward." A crowd of well-dressed patrons murmured around it. They say even the grandmasters in Seoul couldn't crack it. One man whispered, 20 years. Another sighed, that puzzle has broken more geniuses than it's made. Tanya pushed her way to the front, her brow furrowed. She wasn't looking at the money. She was looking at the pattern. To her, it wasn't an impossible puzzle, just a messy one. She turned to the man beside her, a voice small but clear. "Excuse me, sir, is $50 million enough for 2 roasted chickens?" The man blinked, then chuckled at the disheveled child's absurd question. Before he could answer, Tanya had slipped under the velvet robe. Her small hands moved with a blur of intuitive grace, plucking stones from the side tray and placing them on the magnetic board. Clack, clack, clack. Each move was a lightning strike of clarity, severing the white dragon's connections, choking its escape routes. In less than a minute, the legendary, unsolvable puzzle was dismantled. The white dragon was captured. That, a stern silence fell over the lobby. Jaws hung open. All eyes were on the grimy little girl who was now rubbing her stomach, the growling having returned with a vengeance. "Hey, kid, get away from there." A sharp-suited assistant rushed forward, his face a mask of condescending annoyance. This isn't a playground. Shoo. Before he could grab her, a calm, resonant voice cut through the tension. That's enough. Mark, Janice Silver, the CEO of the hall, stepped forward. He moved with an understated elegance, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his presence radiating a quiet authority that instantly commanded respect. He hadn't been focused on the puzzle, but on the girl, the startling precision in her movements, the pure, unadulterated focus in her eyes. And now, the profound hunger that had driven her. He saw past the dirt and the worn clothes to the raw genius within. Are you hungry? He asked Tanya, his voice gentle. She nodded vigorously, her eyes fixed on him. Mr. Silver turned to his stunned assistant. Get her a full meal, whatever she wants. And Mark, he added, his tone hardening slightly, remember the first rule of this hall. A person's worth is measured by the quality of their game, not the quality of their clothes. Never forget that again. A short while later, Mr. Silver gathered his core members in a private meeting room. The air, once electric with the shock of Tanya's feet, was now thick with dread. The faces of his most loyal players, his family, were etched with worrying. He stood before them, his usual calm demeanor strained. I've received a formal notice, he began, his voice heavy. Xavier is coming. A collective gasp filled the room. Xavier, the self-proclaimed king of Go from Babel, was a predator. His methods were legendarily cruel. He challenged halls, and when he won, he didn't just take ownership. He broke the fingers of the losing master as a final act of humiliation. He is challenging the hall. Winner takes all. Mr. Silver's gaze swept over the faces of the people he had mentored and protected for years. I cannot ask any of you to face him. He is a monster. He opened the briefcase on the table, revealing stacks of cash. This is everything I have, my life savings. I want you all to take it. Leave the city and start new lives. Your safety is all that matters. A young, hot-headed player named Heaven slammed his fist on the table, his eyes blazing with defiant loyalty. No, Master Silver, we're not running. This is our home. You built this place for us, when no one else would give us a chance. He stood, his voice ringing with passion. If that monster wants this hall, it'll have to go through all of us. I will stand with you until the very end, until... Another member echoed, and soon the room was filled with a chorus of determined voices. A fragile sense of unity settled over them, a small flame of defiance against an overwhelming darkness. Mr. Silver looked at their resolute faces, his heart aching with a mixture of pride and terror. They were brave, and they were loyal, but against a titan like Xavier, he feared it wouldn't be nearly enough. The air in the Shadow Go hall was thick with a silence heavier than any before a match. Janice Silver stood behind a worn wooden table, his face etched with a weary resolve as he counted out stacks of cash. It wasn't profit, it was severance, the last of the hall's emergency funds, meant to give his loyal staff something to hold on to before the doors were shuttered for good. He pushed the thin bundle toward Kevin, his top player and de facto manager. Tanya, who had been watching the solemn ritual from a corner, saw the paper stacks exchanging hands. In her world, paper like that was traded for warm buns and steaming bowls of noodles. Her stomach, a hollow pit of hunger, gave a painful clench. Without a second thought, driven by the purest, most primal instinct, she darted forward, her small hand reaching for a stack on the table. Hey! Kevin's voice was a whip crack, sharp with fear and frayed nerves. He slapped her hand away. Not hard, but with enough force to make her flinch back. What do you think you're doing? This isn't a handout for street kids. Tanya stumbled back, cradling her hand. Confusion, stark and painful, clouded her large, dark eyes. She looked from Kevin's angry face to the paper rectangles, then up at Mr. Silver, the only person who had shown her any kindness. Her gaze was a silent, desperate question. She didn't understand the accusation in Kevin's voice, the concept of opportunism, or the value of the paper he guarded so fiercely. She only understood the ache in her belly and the sting of rejection. "That's enough, Kevin." Mr. Silver's voice was low, but carried an authority that cut through the tension. He moved from behind the table to place a reassuring hand on Tanya's shoulder. "She doesn't understand. She's just a child, and she's hungry." He looked around at the grim faces of his staff. "Whatever happens to this hall, it is my responsibility to protect everyone under its roof, especially the most vulnerable." A flicker of shame passed through the room. They saw the girl not as a grifter, but as their compassionate leader saw her, a lost child caught in their storm. For a moment, their shared fear was eclipsed by renewed loyalty to the man who refused to abandon his principles. Even at finding her voice, Tanya looked past them all, her focus narrowing on the source of their fear. "I can beat him," she declared, her voice small but clear. "The king of Go." A few incredulous snorts rippled through the staff. "My master taught me," she continued, a note of simple pride in her tone. "He always loses to me. This time." The snorts turned into outright, bitter laughter. The idea was absurd. This scrawny, naive girl, who didn't even know what money was, claiming she could defeat masters her own legendary teacher couldn't. They saw a delusional child, not a prodigy, and their condescension was a fresh wound. Mr. Silver knelt, bringing himself eye level with her. His expression was gentle, but his eyes were filled with a gravity she hadn't seen before. "Tanya, this isn't a game like you play on the mountain. The man coming here, Xavier, he is not like your master. He's dangerous." He glanced at the still fuming Kevin. "He is fierce. Even more fierce than Kevin." Tanya's brow furrowed. She didn't understand degrees of fierce, only the stark contrast of winning and losing on the Go board. "But I can win," she insisted, her small fists clenching at her sides. "This is an adult matter," one of the other players said dismissively, turning away. The conversation moved on, flowing around her as if she were a stone in a stream. She was brushed aside, her talent the only thing of value she possessed rendered invisible. A profound sense of helplessness washed over her. Just then, the front door creaked open and the junior member stumbled in, his face ashen. "He's here." A collective intake of breath sucked the remaining warmth from the room. The heavy air of impending doom became a crushing weight. The door swung open fully, revealing Xavier. He was a man carved from ice, his tailored suit a severe black that seemed to absorb the light around him. He stepped inside with an unhurried, predatory grace, flanked by two figures, a woman, Lana, with a gaze as sharp as a shard of glass, and a man, Victor, built like a wall of silent intimidation. Xavier's eyes, cold and dismissive, swept across the room, his lips curling into a smile that held no warmth, only contempt. "Janice," he said, his voice a silken fret, "still clinging to this dusty relic. I've come to help you let go." He strolled toward the main playing area, his entourage parting the terrified staff like a ship's prow through water. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries. The terms are simple." He stopped and picked up a white ghost stone, rolling it between his thumb and forefinger. "My players against yours. For every game your hall loses, one of your players loses a finger." Gasps of horror and outrage filled the hall. "You can't be serious," Kevin choked out. Xavier's smile widened. "Oh, I am. I'm not just here to take your hall, Janice. I'm here to ensure none of you ever have the dexterity to challenge me or my enterprise again." The chilling finality of his words hung in the air. This wasn't a corporate takeover. It was an annihilation. Fueled by a desperate, foolish courage, Kevin stepped forward. "I'll play." Another of the hall's top players, A grim-faced man named Chen joined him. The matches were a brutal, swift execution. Lana and Victor moved with an inhuman precision, their stones clicking onto the boards with the finality of coffin nails. They dismantled Kevin and Chen's strategies effortlessly, their play a cold, mathematical art devoid of passion but full of deadly efficiency. Within minutes, it was over. Two decisive, humiliating losses. Silence descended once more, absolute and terrifying. Xavier gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Victor grabbed Kevin, forcing him to his knees and slamming his right hand, his playing hand, flat onto the smooth surface of a go board. Xavier's other man stepped forward, producing a small, gleaming blade from his jacket pocket. A choke sob escaped someone in the crowd. Janice surged forward, his voice raw with desperation. Xavier! No. Stop this. But it was too late. The man with the blade raised it high, its polished edge catching the dim light. Despair, thick and suffocating, washed over the Shadow Hall. As Kevin stared at the descending steel, his face a mask of pure terror, it was clear that more than just his finger was about to be severed. It was of their hope, their community, and their world. The heavy silence in the Shadow chess hall was a shroud. Each tick of the clock was a hammer blow counting down the final seconds of a legacy. Mr. Janice Silver straightened his tie, his movement stiff with a somber resolve. He looked at the polished go board, not as a field of battle, but as a scaffold. This final, desperate match against Xavier was not for victory, but for honor, a last stand before the inevitable signing of documents that would surrender his family's hall. He took a deep, shuddering breath and began his slow walk toward the table, ready to offer himself as the final sacrifice. Wait, the voice was clear, and cut through the suffocating tension like a shard of glass. Every head turned. Tanya stood there, having pushed through the ring of despondent members, her small frame radiating an energy that defied the room's despair. Her eyes, usually wide with a naive curiosity, were now narrowed, fixed on Xavier with an intensity that was startling. "You want to play for the hall," she announced, her voice ringing with unwavering conviction. "Play against me." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through Xavier's entourage. Xavier himself let out a short, incredulous bark. He looked her up and down, from her worn sneakers to her determined frown, and sneered. "And who are you, the janitor's kid? Don't waste my time. You beat everyone else," Tanya stated, ignoring the insult. It wasn't a question. It was a simple observation of fact. "Now play me. This is getting pathetic, Silver," Xavier drawled, turning his dismissive gaze back to Janice. "Is this your secret weapon, a boastful little girl?" He gestured lazily to his second-in-command, Lana. "Go humor the child. Get it over with quickly." Lana, a woman with a sharp bob and an even sharper gaze, strode forward with a weary sigh, as if being asked to sort of fly. She sat opposite Tanya, placing her bowl of white stones down with a perfunctory clatter. The message was clear. This was a chore, not the contest. The hall held its breath. Tanya, holding the black stones, took the first turn. She reached into her bowl, her fingers closing around a single, smooth stone. Then, with a quiet confidence that belied the gasps from the onlookers, she placed it directly on the 3-3 point in the upper right corner. It was an unorthodox opening, almost universally considered a passive, amateurish move. It ceded influence and territory from the very beginning. The hall members groaned collectively, their last flicker of hope extinguished. "It's over," someone whispered. "She doesn't even know the basics," but Janice Silver didn't groan. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on the board. He saw not an error, but a declaration. A glint of something not just hope, but profound intrigue sparkled in his weary eyes. He had seen that move before, decades ago, in the hands of a legendary master who played with the spirit of the mountain. not the rules of the city. Lana smirked, placing her stone with swift, predatory confidence, claiming the surrounding territory Tanya had so foolishly ignored. The game began, and for the first dozen moves, it followed the script everyone expected. Lana built a formidable wall of influence, her white stones cordoning off huge swaths of the board. Tanya's black stones looked like scattered, isolated pebbles against a rising tide. Then, the pattern shifted. Tanya's unconventional placements began to connect in startling ways. A stone here, another there, moves that seemed random began to reveal a breathtaking, strategic web. Lana's confident smile faltered. Her attacks were not just blocked, they were absorbed, redirected, and turned against her. The pebbles were becoming a fortress from the inside out. The murmurs in the hall changed from despair to confusion, then to dawning, electric astonishment. Lana's hand hovered over the board, trembling slightly. A bead of sweat traced a path down her temple. She was trapped, her strongest group of stones cut off and dying, and she hadn't even seen it happen. At that moment, Tanya leaned forward slightly. "There," she said softly, pointing to a seemingly irrelevant spot on the board. "If you play there, you can still save them." The generosity of the move was more stunning than the strategy itself. It was a master teaching a student, not a warrior finishing an opponent. Humiliation burned on Lana's cheeks. She stared at the spot, then at the intricate trap she had fallen into, and saw the truth. With a shaky hand, she placed her stone where Tanya had indicated, salvaging a fraction of her position. But the game was already lost. 10 moves later, with a final, elegant click, Tanya placed a stone that cemented her victory. Lana stared at the board, her mind unable to process the systematic, gentle demolition she had just endured. "A fluke," Xavier spat, his face tightening into a mask of fury. He refused to acknowledge what he had just seen. "She got lucky, Victor. Get up there. No more games." And this, Victor, a hulking man with a reputation for aggressive, overwhelming force, sat down with a thud that shook the table. He glared at Tanya, his intent clear. Annihilation. Tanya offered him the ball of black stones. Unfazed, she picked one up and, with the exact same serene confidence as before, placed it on the 3-3 point in the opposite corner. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. It was an open challenge, a blatant mockery of their skill. Victor's eyes narrowed. He wouldn't be tricked like Lana. He responded with a ferocious sequence of moves, determined to punish her audacity and crush her before her strange strategy could take root. He played with speed and power, his stones slamming onto the board like hammer blows. But Tanya's responses were like water, flowing around his aggression, yielding here, pushing there. Victor's initial confidence began to curdle into a cold, creeping dread. He felt like he was punching smoke. Every powerful move he made seemed to push him deeper into an invisible net. Her seemingly casual placements were luring him, guiding his rage, and using his own force against him. Suddenly, his hand froze midair. His eyes widened in dawning horror. He wasn't looking at the last 20 moves. He was looking at the very first one, her 3-3 point. He saw it now, flawless. Pre-planned deception. Every single one of his dominant moves had been anticipated. She hadn't been reacting to him at all. She had been leading him down a perfectly orchestrated path to his own destruction from the very first stone. "I resign," Victor choked out, the words tasting like ash. The game had lasted half as long as the one with Lana. The King of Go's last hope was shattered. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, the Shadow Go chess hall erupted. Cheers, shouts, and relieved sobs exploded in a wave of catharsis, washing over the members who had been drowning in despair just minutes before. Xavier stood frozen, his face pale, his arrogance stripped away to reveal a core of bewildered, humiliated shock. He stared at the girl, then at the board, utterly unable to comprehend the masterclass that had just dismantled his empire. Amidst the celebration, Janus Silver's gaze was fixed only on Tanya. He saw not a child, not a lucky amateur, but a prodigy of impossible talent. A force of nature that had descended from a mountain and, with a few quiet stones, saved them all. The final white stone clicked into place, a sound no louder than a falling tear. Yet it shattered the suffocating silence of the Shadow-Go chess hall. Every eye was fixed on the grid of black and white, a stark landscape of a battle that had just ended in an unthinkable slaughter. Xavier, the self-proclaimed king of this domain, stared at the board. The patterns swam before his eyes, not as a game, but as a brutal testament to his own unraveling. Each of Tanya's moves, once dismissed as the naive flailings of a child, now revealed itself as a masterstroke of a hidden grand strategy. He had walked into her fortress, swaggering and blind, only to find every gate locked, every escape route severed. He was surrounded, his armies decimated, his king a solitary prisoner in a cage of her design. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a pallid mask of disbelief. The sneer he had worn like a crown melted away, his broad shoulders slumping as the weight of his defeat finally crushed his ego. He lifted his gaze from the board to the girl sitting opposite him. Tanya wasn't gloating. She wasn't even smiling. She was fidgeting slightly, her eyes darting toward the snack table near the wall, her stomach rumbling audibly in the quiet room. He had been beaten. Not just beaten, but dismantled, piece by piece, by a hungry girl from the mountains. A choked sound, half laugh, half sob, escaped his lips. "I lost," he rasped, words feeling like shards of glass in his throat. He had never uttered them before, not with such finality. Slowly, deliberately, as if moving through deep water, Xavier stood up. He walked around the table, his expensive shoes making no sound on the worn wooden floor. He stopped before Tanya's seat and, to the collective gasp of the entire hall, he dropped to his knees. He pressed his palms to the floor and bowed, his forehead touching the dusty wood in a gesture of absolute surrender. It was the ultimate admission of failure, the most profound show of respect one player could offer another. "My name is Xavier," he said, his voice muffled by the floorboards. "I was arrogant and foolish. Your skill is a mountain, and I am but a pebble at its base. As per the terms of my own stupid wager, please accept me as your disciple." Tanya blinked. Her thoughts pulled away from the tantalizing image of a roasted chicken leg. She leaned forward, peering down at the top of his head. "Disciple?" she asked, her voice clear and curious. "What does that mean? Is it like a friend?" Xavier looked up, his face a mess of confusion and humiliation. "It means I serve you. I learn from you. I will do as you command, Master." Her eyes lit up, a connection finally made in her straightforward mind. "Oh, okay," she thought for a moment, her priorities perfectly in order. "Then, as your master, I command you to buy me to roasted chickens with the crispy skin, and you have to promise not to chop off anyone's fingers anymore. It's mean, and it makes people sad." For a moment, Xavier could only stare, his mind struggling to process the command. Not a demand for his wealth, not an order to close his rival hall, but a simple, heartfelt request for dinner and basic human decency. A genuine smile, the first honest one he'd shown all day, touched his lips. "Yes, Master," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To chickens and no more chopping. I swear it." The tension in the hall finally snapped. A single, tentative clap broke the silence, followed by another, and then another, until the entire room erupted in a thunderous wave of applause and relieved cheers. The members of the Shadow-Go Hall, who had stood on the precipice of ruin, surged forward. They weren't just celebrating a victory. They were celebrating a miracle. They lifted Tanya onto their shoulders, their unlikely savior, a tiny girl who had stared down a monster and asked for a snack. Perched high above the crowd, Tanya beamed, her small hands clapped in delight. Not at the adoration, but at the concrete promise of a full stomach. For the first time, the world outside her mountain felt warm. Here, winning didn't just mean staving off hunger. It meant laughter and cheers, and a feeling of being held up by friendly hands. It was a strange, wonderful new kind of full. Through the joyous chaos, Janice Silver watched her, his usually calm and composed expression unreadable. Relief washed over him, so potent it almost buckled his knees. The hall was safe, his people were safe. But his thoughts were consumed by the small girl at the center of it all. He began to move toward her, needing to understand, needing to speak with her away from the jubilant crowd. As he neared the throng, a large figure suddenly planted himself in his path. It was Xavier, now on his feet, his suit rumpled but his posture rigid with a newfound, almost comical purpose. "Stand back," Xavier grunted, holding out an arm to block Silver's path. "State your business with my master." Silver stopped, an amused eyebrow raised. "Your master, Xavier? A moment ago you were threatening to take my hall. A moment ago I was an unenlightened brute," Xavier retorted, his face dead serious. "I have seen the Tao of the Go board, and it is a small girl who loves chicken. Now, what are your intentions? I warn you, if you cause even a moment of distress, you will answer to me." He puffed out his chest. I will challenge you to a game, and I will use her strategies against you." Silver couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. The absurdity was breathtaking. He bypassed the new, overzealous disciple with a polite nod. "I'm sure you will. For now, I just want to talk to her." He gently extricated Tanya from the cheering members, leading her by the hand to a quiet corner of the hall, near a window that looked out onto the darkening city street. The sounds of celebration softened to a pleasant hum in the background. He knelt down so he was at eye level. "Tanya," he began, his voice low and gentle, "that was the most incredible game of Go I have ever witnessed. You play with a wisdom that it's not of this world." "Who was he? Your master on the mountain?" Tanya looked at him, her expression simple and unguarded. There was no artifice in her, no grand story of a legendary sage. There was only the plain, unvarnished truth. "My master," she said, tilting her head. "He was just an old man. He had food. He said if I won a game, I could eat. If I lost," she paused, her gaze turning distant, as if recalling a familiar and unpleasant sensation. "If I lost, I would get so hungry I'd see stars and fall over." He said fainting was bad for my concentration. Janice Silver felt the words land like stones in his chest. Everything clicked into place with a horrifying, heartbreaking clarity. Her unrefined genius, her obsession with food, her complete lack of concern for fame or status. She hadn't been playing a game. She had been fighting for her life, one stone at a time. Her transcendent skill wasn't born from passion or intellectual curiosity, but from the most fundamental human need, survival. Go wasn't an art to her. It was the difference between a meal and collapse. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the prodigy. He saw a lonely, neglected child who had turned desperation into a thing of profound beauty. He saw a brilliant light that had been forced to shine in the dark, nourished by nothing more than scraps and the will to keep standing. The calculating CEO, the protector of the Go Hall, vanished. In his place was simply a man, looking at a little girl who deserved a home, a warm bed, and the freedom to play Go not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She had saved his world. Now, he knew with absolute certainty, it was his turn to build one for her. A gentle smile touched his lips, filled with a warmth and protectiveness that was entirely new. "Well, Tanya, he said softly, his voice full of an unspoken promise. Here, at this hall, you will never have to play for your supper again.